Hey everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode of the 12 Step Thrashers. I'm Eric. My buddy Ev is on the other side of the screen. And with us today, very special guest, Chad Valier.
What's up,
There
guys?
he is. Hey, what's up?
Thanks for having me on, man. I've been looking forward to this.
Wow, awesome. I've been following you for a little while now. Well, we have similar connections at one point, right? So
Right.
It was weird how all our worlds kind of intertwined at the same time at one point.
Yeah, over tragic events, but
But
life is surprising.
Yeah, it always comes back to that for me. Like I've never gone through a tragedy that didn't take me somewhere I wasn't expecting to go, but in a good, like a positive direction. You know what I mean? And it's like you become one of those people that just accept tragedy for what it is, or you kind of go with it and try to take it as a lesson, right? With what brought us all together. I mean, you couldn't have put that group of people in one room without, that person, and so it was like, it was insane.
Yeah, no, the sheer eclectic nature of the group was was on display that day.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean. So somebody once said to me a long time ago, you put a bunch of healthy people in a room and it'll get a little hairy. You put a bunch of unhealthy people in a room, and what do you think is going to happen? So,
But I got to learn that we can be very different, even if we are all addicts in recovery. We have that in common, but then there's life besides it.
well,
Yeah, everybody.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What I find is it's like, so at first, when you first come into recovery, so, I walked around in recovery believing nobody could understand the depths of my mind and my heart. I was just this unique guy, only to find out it doesn't matter what walk of life you're in, how many people, like when you walk into any 12-step program, you're reading those basic texts or the big book or whatever fellowship you belong to. And it's almost like a personal attack when you open those books. So to walk around believing that you have nothing in common with these people or nobody would ever understand you, that's insane, because there's meetings and rooms all over the planet full of people who think exactly like you. But back to what you were saying, Eric, was, but take that out of the equation, take away the character defects and the drugs. We are all very different people. And as much as our story led us to the exact same place, the events, leading up to that are often different, right?
Well, that's the point, right? Like Ev and I have maybe more similar backgrounds, us together, than we do to you. But all these different people with different backgrounds, with different upbringings, different life stories, all find themselves in the same place at the end.
And that's the scary thing for me about that is, you get people who, everybody's rock bottom is so different, right? And, you get people. So I've used this example in the past, like, sometimes maybe a 20-year-old kid doesn't know what real loss is. And I'm not saying they can't. I'm saying in a lot of cases, right? So at 20 years old, you can't keep a job. Your parents hate you. You hate your parents, like all that kind of stuff. It's like, what's really different than most 20-year-olds or teenagers for that matter, right? But then you get, to the older addicts or the older people in active addiction, and there's a lot more lost, it seems, in those situations. So yeah, like it always amazes me, why people sometimes will not come into any kind of recovery because they don't feel they're as bad of an addict, or they hear somebody who was homeless pushing a grocery cart, and they're like, well, if I walk in there, even though they need the help, they're almost afraid to walk into those situations because they don't feel like they're a big enough addict or something.
The imposter syndrome manifests in any place, right? If we feel we don't belong, or we're not addict enough to deserve help or actually get better, it's so weird. But I had that feeling even walking through rehab, snorting an insane amount of cocaine every day. I still felt I'm not sick enough to be here. Up until the point I got to detox, I was not convinced that rehab was a place for me.
See, I thought it was going to be great for me because I was going to learn how to successfully use drugs. That's what I thought rehab was going to do.
I've heard that before.
But I never wanted to get well. Like, and that was the problem for so long in my first real big attempt at recovery. was I really didn't want to get well. I just wanted my life to not be shit anymore. And it was like, okay, you know what though? And we get into this mode of, you know, you look a little better, you feel a little better, you know, so you're better. So, oh, I got my head on now. I can probably have a couple drinks. You know what I mean? And I went for years believing I didn't have a drinking problem. I was a drug addict because my drugs of choice were always chemicals, right? So alcohol to me it was just something people did. You know what I mean? Like I knew people who had, you know, drinking problems and whatever. And my dad was an alcoholic. But for some reason, I believed that I had it under control, even though I would drink till I was blackout every time. You know, like who drinks a 40 pounder to start? You know, like that, you know, but I don't have a drinking problem. And if I stay away from the drugs, I'm going to be okay. But every time I drink, I'm an asshole. Right? It's tolerable after a point. Like it was always fun to hang out with me to a point. But then you get to that point and it always ended at that point. Like there was no like, I'm going to have a couple. Cause I used to say, if I'm thirsty, I'll have a pop. You know, I wanted to get drunk. Like that was the purpose, you know? So walking around for so long, believing I wasn't, you know, and then realizing it's not the substance. The substance is not what my problem. You know what I mean?
I think you described it, and I know that's my situation. The more,
Yeah.
I have to get to the end. I have to get to where I'm going, which is drunk as fuck. There's
Right.
no like stopping. I have to get to where I finish my finish line of that night.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, and I realize, and this is something I've learned in recovery, is how far back my obsessive nature goes. Like, you know, when I think about step 2, became willing, right? Became willing that a God of my understanding could restore me to sanity. You know, that sort of insinuates that I was sane at some point, right? But when I think about, you know, so I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but when I was young, we used to get a thing called the consumer's catalog. I don't know if you guys know what that is.
Yes, yeah.
And I would run home from school and it would come around July, August, and the new one would come and I'd open it up and I would see all the toys. Now I grew up in pretty much next to poverty. So I got toys, like maybe something small on my birthday. I got a few cool things at Christmas and that was it. Like this isn't a pity trip. I'm just telling you how it was, right? But that, you know, I would get this catalog and I would go through the catalog and I'd hit the section of the toys that I liked. And I would do this every day. And I would tell my mom and I would write my letter to Santa Claus and I would wake up Christmas morning and I would have a few of those toys and I would be ecstatic. And then I'd play with them for about an hour and then they're over in the corner and I'm done. I'm already bored. I want something else. Right. And it took me a long time to realize, you know, like my obsessive nature goes all the way that far back. Right.
That's a good point. Like substances do not matter. I say very often, like it could be an eating disorder. I could pick my nose until it bleeds. Whatever that is that I'm going to do to the excess is what I'm craving. I recently stopped smoking and vaping. I don't crave nicotine. I crave like smoking a whole pack until it hurts.
Right. Yeah. Well, and
The addiction is weird.
the other thing too is like, you know, when I quit doing drugs and I realized that I was still being a piece of shit. You know what I mean? So that showed me it wasn't drugs. Drugs were just, you know, I don't know, like they were a temporary solution, I guess. You know, that's the textbook way of saying it. But it was like, you know, and I often say this is I lived my life on drugs and character defects. And then you take the drugs out of the equation and what was I? You know, and still believing that I didn't know. I remember my sponsor saying to me, like, are you an addict or are you a piece of shit? And I always love that story because, yeah, like two things can be true. He said, like, because I wouldn't admit I was a drug addict, right? And I remember him saying to me, well, if you're not a drug addict, why are you doing all these fucked up things? Right? And I'm going, well, he goes, so you're either a drug addict or you're a piece of shit. And if you're a drug addict, I can help you. If you're a piece of shit, you got to go somewhere else to go get help. Right? So I was like, hey, fair enough. Right? I'm a drug addict. I'll take it. Right?
Yeah. Given the choice, I'm a drug addict finally. But you know, like abstinence is in many capacity the step 0. It's abstinence permit you to start working on yourself and be less of a piece of shit.
Right. Well, I find most people, like the minute you walk into any kind of surrender, I think that's step one without even realizing it. Because
Mhm.
you're going like, I'm powerless. Like, and powerless to me, like, dude, I couldn't even begin to tell you what powerless looked like to me. Like, getting surrounded at gunpoint with my daughter in the car, leaving a crack house, things like that, listening to her scream in the jail cell while they're booking me, like, you know, not being able to go into a room without bringing a black cloud with me and nobody really wanting me there. Like nobody wanted me around. I brought a black cloud, like I was miserable and I was manipulative and whatever I thought I could get from you, I would try, but I wouldn't do it with force. I would use pity or, the world's not giving me a fair shake. And meanwhile, I had every opportunity in the world. I mean, I grew up in poverty, but as far as opportunity, I mean, school here, I could have went into school properly, maybe not college or university, but there was other programs that I could have done. But, that's the best part about doing the step work for me was that I got to see where everything that kind of went wrong, I was the common denominator in, and that's it's a blessing to me today because I can correct those things. Like a lot of people hate admitting, that there's an issue or a problem because the minute you do that, change has to happen. Right. And as soon as change has to happen, like if change was that easy, we'd all just do it. Right. And I didn't really want to change because I was comfortable, like and I use comfortable loosely. I was comfortable in understanding my behaviors. Like I knew what made me tick. I knew why I was doing what I was doing. But here's the thing. People don't have time to care why you're being an idiot. Like people talk about the onion and, you got to peel back, you got to dig deep and nobody understands me, but who has time to care? Nobody has time to care that, I'm a survivor from a sexual assault when I was 4 years old. They only see the direct result of me being an asshole. They don't have time to care that I grew up with nothing. They only see the direct result of me manipulating them out of their money. They don't have time to care why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I don't think it's fair to expect people to do that.
It's true because nobody owes us shit because we decided to get clean. We're still the one accountable for what's next.
Right. And the thing too is if there was no consequences, why would we stop? Right.
Exactly.
I quit using because, first of all, it never ended different. From the minute I picked up my first drink till the minute I picked up my last drink, drug, whatever it was. But anything I love, I can blow my life up with it. Like anything I love, whether it's sex, porn, food. If I love it and it makes me feel good, done. Right. And I have to be careful with everything. The gym, even like I go to the gym. I can't go to the gym, 3 times a week. I got to go 6. And I get mad if I don't go the 7. And I force myself to not go on the 7. You know what I mean? Like everything I do, I overdo because it's in my wiring. And you can't tell me that I chose to be like that. Right? And the arrogance of people who do that to other people. Like you chose this. Well, yeah, like I chose it the first time. I made a decision, but not everybody who tries smoking gets cancer. You know what I mean? It's like we all make a decision one day and it will affect us all differently. Right? So expecting, and that's the thing with my family too. So half of us are addicts and the other half aren't. And the half that aren't totally do not understand why we are. It's like, well, why don't you just stop?
But the medical system is built this way, right? You go to a treatment, you receive the treatment, and then you're cured. If you have ailment, you take that pill, and then you're no longer sick. But addiction doesn't work this way.
No, and it's just like
instantaneous. That's right.
Right, and you can't pinpoint the pain. Right? Exactly. How do you cure something when you can't pinpoint pain? I know if I get stabbed, I can treat that wound. We have a disease that tells us we're fine.
Especially when we're not.
Especially when we're not. And then, then the whole guilt and shame thing, man. Like I'll tell you this right now, and I know in my heart, man, I can talk all the shit I want. But I'm telling you this, if I go back out, I don't think I'd come back. Because I put myself on display on purpose. A lot of people go, wow, you really put yourself out there. And it's like, yeah, I do, for the simple fact that I need people to know what my eyes look like and what my face looks like. And if my character is a bit different, you know what I mean? Like I make sure that I'm in the public eye because I don't want to be unaccountable. Right.
Wow. And that you said it in a way that I've never actually voiced that clearly, but I think that's the reason for Eric and I to be public with our recovery, even at risk of having repercussion in our life, in our career, or whatever. Because for me, authenticity and the fact that I am doing this recovery, I'm not faking it,
Right.
is very important. But at the same time, like I'm more comfortable saying shit on the podcast that I'm even in the rooms.
Right.
Like I would say things that I don't even have to think about it, but I wrap myself out on the public audience,
Which is
but I
great.
couldn't say that in a room.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even performing, like I sing and I know it's easier for me to sing and in a crowd of, 300 than it is 2. And your forum is big out here, right? So, I mean, you're speaking to a bigger audience. It's not so intimate, right? But you're also helping people. And that is the whole thing. Like I have a big personality, even like when I was in active use and even early recovery, I was so sick, right? And most of what I did was out of ego, right? Like, I would sit in meetings. I wouldn't even listen to people, man. I would just be waiting for my turn to talk, gathering my information and waiting to have this super clever thing to say so that people would think I was smart. But I'm only the smartest guy at a meeting where all of our best thinking got us there. But I'm trying to be the smartest guy in there. When I would do, like, I can remember doing, like, the things I do now, I do, like, little TikTok motivational things from time to time, usually every few days or something, if I think I have something clever to say. But I would do them out of pure ego, and they were so cringe. Like, when I look at them now, like, I'm glad they're not up anymore because I tore a bunch of them down, but there was nothing sincere about it. It was, how am I going to look really clever? How am I going to take this experience and look like, I'm doing better than I am, and I want to be the guy who has all the answers. And at one point, I wanted to be this voice for all the addicts on the planet, and I'd like be fighting with people on Facebook and just next level because I was still so sick. Like I was clean, but I was sick, right? And that comes into the work and doing the step work and things like that for me. And, I did counseling and things like that too, because I was such a disaster, right?
But that's a good point. Did you get sober in the 12-step rooms, or did you get the treatment? Or
I went to rehab twice, but I still continued to use, right? Because when I went both times, like I went to one for 21 days and it was CBT. I wasn't doing 12-step nothing, right? I was like, you guys are crazy. You hug me, you're chanting, you're praying, like this is weird, right? And at that time, you weren't selling me any of that stuff, right? And then I got out for a bit and I was spending a lot of time with my daughter, my youngest daughter. And she noticed a difference, and she noticed such a difference that she just said to me, like, I like coming around a lot more. I don't know what you did, and she was only 6 at the time. So I knew I wanted to go back, but the only thing available was a 12-step year-long program. And I was like, whatever it takes, right? And so I went in there not wanting anything to do with 12-step anything. But, the seeds start getting planted, whether you're ready or not. And I always say that I cut my dope with NA, right? Because after I started going to meetings, it was like anytime I got messed up, I was not having a good time, right? But I got out of that treatment. I got kicked out after like 4 months. I got kicked out because I couldn't call myself a drug addict. Or sorry, alcoholic. It was an AA-based one, right? But I couldn't admit that I had an issue, right? It was like, no, I'm going to get things under control. I'm going to go back out and live my life. I'm not going to be coming to these meetings that you're making me go to 4 a week, right? You guys are weird. I'm good. You guys are screwed, right?
So if we go back into your upbringing, was religion or spirituality at any point something that was valued in your family?
Well, my dad was Catholic, right? But my mom had nothing. My mom called herself an atheist, but, the story around the table, it's pretty funny. When my dad came in when I was being born, she was screaming to God from the pain, but she was an atheist. So, but no, my mom, because my mom and dad separated when I was really, really young. But my dad, I think he was a more devout Catholic when he was younger, and then he sort of lost his way like a prodigal. And then he sort of found his way back near the last like 15 years of his life. Right. And by then he had, like, I was already out of the house, and he had younger kids that he brought up Catholic, but I was raised by my mom, and there was no, like, the Bible in my house sat on the coffee table and it was just a book. And I can remember hearing somebody say Jesus Christ out of anger, like Jesus Christ. And I would say that, and I got in trouble for saying a swear word, right? Because I said it the way it was said. So for a lot of years, I thought Jesus Christ was a swear word. I didn't know that he was a person, right? So there was no, like, if there was any kind of Sunday school, I wasn't allowed to go, things like that, right? Like, but I always knew there was something, and I couldn't, later on in my life, I realized a lot of my intuition and the things that I thought were signs, it was him, obviously, now that, like, I understand what was happening. But for years, like, I did everything in my power to avoid trying to live my life in Christ. Like, that was not going to be a thing for me at all.
Some form of resentment.
Well, I didn't get why, and what I didn't realize, and I didn't understand how he could let somebody have the upbringing I had, or that he could let me, be raped by an uncle. Like, I never understood that. But what I didn't realize is it's like God and Jesus didn't do that. Man did that. That wasn't God. That was people. Right. And what a gentleman he is by giving us free will. This man, if you believe in God or you believe in Jesus Christ, this man died for us. He got beat for however long and had to carry his cross and gets crucified. And then he doesn't even make us worship him. Like, he's just like, if that was me, I'd be like, you owe me, man. Like, you owe me something. Right. But he didn't do that.
Jesus has had better values, more fitting with me than any religion actually made out of him. So yeah, I kind of agree. This was a humble man.
Right. So I lived in my own will. Like, I didn't, he gave me the choice to make the choices, and I made them. Right. And so did the other people, and the people that harm me. Like, I always laugh when people hate the church, and it's like, who got treated worse by the church than Jesus Christ? You know what I mean? And it's like, I won't beat you guys to death with the Bible. I'll talk about it all day long, but you know what I mean? But I found really, like, that was where, that made the difference in my recovery, to be honest. And it's always, and I know a couple guys that I'm close with where the basic text brought me closer to the Bible, and not even on purpose, because it's a not religious program, but you take God out of that book, it's only 35 pages long or something. Right. So
is it on step 3 or step 4 that the Lord is also pretty present, right? So it's not religious to begin with, but it kind of is at a certain point in time in the book.
Well, they call him God throughout the book, but they always say a God of your understanding, right? But I always say to people, like, so I know what I believe in. I know it. I know, for me, what is true. But I say, like, whatever higher power is keeping you alive in your heart, like, I'm not going to tell you that your belief is wrong, even if I think it is. You know what I mean? Like, to me, the only way through to get to God is through Jesus Christ. But somebody else may not believe that, and that's cool with me. I'm still going to treat you with love, dignity, and respect, because you don't have to answer to me. And if it's Vishnu or Ganesh or Buddha or whatever is keeping you alive, do that. Right? Let's just not die. Right? That's what I'm after.
That's very interesting, because Eric and I, we have a good friend in our home group who is also a stepper, and she keeps telling us, you guys are working an extremely good 12-step program, and we never opened the book, right? We did the smart recovery training, the CBT we're referring to, and we live and swear by it, right? But I get to understand that there's a bridge to any program to another, because at the end we all have the same end goal, and it's a matter of, the guiding principles are common sense. Essentially, it's not very prescriptive. Just have common sense.
Well, and that's it. And I mean, I'm just not here to tell anybody how to live unless they want to know how I do it, right? And I refuse to be like, the two things you can't push on someone is God and recovery. Because if you push those two things, you're going to push them farther away, and if you're not ready for either, it's not going to happen. And it doesn't matter how much you try to beat someone in the head with the basic text or the Bible. If you're not ready for it, you ain't going to take it. And it's just that simple. So
Yeah.
for me, when people come to me for any kind of help or information, especially in recovery, my first question is, are you sure you're ready? Are you done? Because I know a lot of people that think they're done, but I knew a lot of people that had a baby and said they were done. But once they forgot about the pain, they were pregnant again. I'm covered in tattoos and I hate getting them. But as soon as they're healed, I want another one. As soon as I get every time I get one, I'm like, that's it, man. I'm not doing anymore. And then I get another one. So like with addiction is it's like, are you done? Like, are you finished? Because if you're not, please, like, I'm going to love you regardless, but don't come to me and waste my time. And not because you're not worth it, but I don't have spare time today. If I'm doing something, I'm making time for it. So if you want help, I will do whatever I can do to help you. But if I do this, you have to be present and you have to be ready because my time is valuable today. And there was a time when it wasn't, right? And I wasted.
You said something interesting at the beginning of the interview. You said that acceptance and surrender often happens before you even step into a room. And Eric and I are on a quest to determine what's the key factor to success in recovery.
Well,
Something that we have in common is that we kind of accepted that we will never use again before going to treatment. Before even admitting that I'm an addict, I will never use again came before that. And that was pure acceptance. I was done.
Yeah, and the same thing for me. I was done too. And we've had this discussion where we've talked about, and you kind of brushed on it a bit there, Chad. You talked about sometimes age or younger people. And it's like you brought up, are you done? And for some people, that acceptance of the behavior and what they're doing, they're not there yet. Right? They're going to face the consequences some more. They got to learn the hard way.
Well, again, like if you think for 1 second that you're going to do any of this successfully, if you think you're going to be a successful using addict ever, you think you're going to drink occasionally, then you're not ready. And it's that simple. Like I've never had to guess if I drank too much water. Am I drinking too much water? Like, am I, did I take too many Halls? You know what I mean? Like you don't think those things because there's no consequences to it. You might pee a lot. Who cares? Right? And everybody's rock bottom. Like I know for me, rock bottom, like I was done because I was spiritually bankrupt. Like I had nothing left. And I remember just being like, I'm no longer afraid to overdose. I'm probably just going to kill myself. Right? Like I was just at that point. It was like, I have kids, I have grandchildren, I have, people in my life that I want to be there for if the opportunity arises. Like I have two children that I have no relationship with, my two daughters, right? I have a relationship with my son and his son, right? But my two daughters, I don't have any relationship with. And, I don't want to be dead if they decide they want to meet up one day. I don't, if they ever need me, whether, sometimes they might, maybe they'll reach out of desperation one day and I'll be able to be there for them. However they reach out, I need to be there for them.
So is it in some ways integrity, right? Even if they're not there looking up for you, you will still make sure that if ever they do, you're up to the standard of how you'd like to present for these kids.
Well, exactly. And my words, my actions, and my thoughts all have to line up at all times. And the minute I start, there is a process to me falling back into old behaviors. And it could be as simple as lying, right? If I start telling the smallest lie and I get away with it, and because a drug addict will always weigh their options, right? It's just in our wiring. It's in our nature, I believe. And
we survived this way. We had to.
Well, that's it. So sometimes I will want to lie over the stupidest shit because it's like maybe because I don't want to face the possible consequence of something that isn't even that big a deal, but because when I apologize today or I don't want to apologize today, it's not because I care about me. It's because hurting somebody else will hurt me. You know what I mean? Like it'll hurt my heart that I did something that may hurt somebody else. Right. And that's where I'm at with that kind of stuff, because it's like, I have to be a man of my word. And because, I have to represent myself a certain way. Like, I'm a man of recovery and I'm a man of God. Right. And I break character. I break character often. I still curse like a trucker sometimes. You know, I try to be more mindful of it, but it's like, I'm still who I am. God knows my heart, you know, but if I, you know, if my pastor happened to log on to this, he'd probably laugh a little bit because he knows me really good. But if every second word I'm dropping is an F-bomb, you know, or like, you know, I don't want somebody to look at me and go, that's what recovery looks like. You know what I mean? I don't want that. Like, I want somebody to go, I want what that guy has because that's what I did. I looked at people and everything they had was not anything I could touch, you know? And I treated recovery like I was hustling dope. I found the guy that had the most of it and I stuck to him, you know, and I just treated recovery like it was drugs.
Interesting. So do you want more recovery?
Always. You know what? I still like, I know you guys call yourselves a 12 step crasher. Is that because you're anti-steppers? Is that?
No, no. Well, let me run you through the quick story. So in our own group, that is a smart base group, a lot of steppers came around, and that's cool, right? Because we all came from the same treatment center, and there's the alumni community. So it's very diverse, and some people are in the community for 5, 6, 7 years, whatever. But one particular person was really adamant to try to recruit people and have more and more sponsees. And, people are getting out of a religious or non 12-step program because they don't like the thing of God, right? But then that guy talks about it, and you should do as I do, otherwise you're gonna relapse, and that kind of
Yeah,
discourse.
that's bullshit.
So we were pretty irate by that, but at the same time we were not necessarily. Well, Eric was a bit more angry than I was, to be honest.
Well, it's what he called us.
But then at some point, that person started to put meetings at the same time as our meetings, trying to compete, right? And one night, our meeting was canceled. Our meeting was canceled. So we said, I told Eric, well, let's go to that guy's meeting. And I can guarantee you that if we come with a smart mindset and that we present well, there's not a single room that will refuse us. So that will be like unease with us being present. So that was the hypothesis, that the program do not matter. And that when comes time for a topic, it's universal. It doesn't have to be from the book. Well, actually, it has not to be from a book for it to be genuine, right? Um, and that was quite a success. We both had very good shares. Not that we want to infiltrate ourselves with that, but we had an impact in that room. And from that moment, the meme page came out as well. We're going to do the 12-step crashers, being like respectful, but critical of 12-step. But we are also critical of smart recovery or harm reduction or Cali sober. We take shots at everybody.
Sure. Well, to me, I'm always like, so for me, I have to be abstinence-based, right? Like, it's just, there's no way around that. But I have no issue with how somebody's choosing to stay alive, right?
Mhm.
Like, I have roots in all the fellowships, right? Like, the first meeting I went to was an AA meeting. I've spoken at AA meetings. I know that it isn't about the substance for me. And I know what smart recovery is. I think it's great. I think whatever is keeping you alive and taking death out of the equation. So, and a lot of people that are abstinence based will tend to shit on other forms of recovery. Like your buddy there, like that guy seems like he's really sick still, right? And if you're trying to just accumulate sponsees as a flex, I mean, that's not recovery to me. That tells me, well, because he's probably not doing the work. And if you're still looking to inflate your ego, you know what I mean? And that's the thing. Like, to me, I have 3 guys that I sponsor, and I've left it there because I'm not going to spread myself thin, because how good am I going to be to 10 guys? I'd sooner, and I'm not saying some people can't do it. Some people are really great at that, and God bless them. Me, I know my limit, and it's not a flex for me. I'm here to try to help somebody get through those steps, get through that program, and not die. It doesn't make me look cooler to have more sponsees. And I'll tell you this, like, I had a sponsee a few months ago overdose and die. So, if I was running on ego, that would have been it for me. But I also know that had nothing to do with me. They go out and sometimes they don't come back, right? There's people who do drugs to party, and there's people who do drugs to die. And I do drugs to die. I didn't do drugs to party. So I know.
When you've been abstinent for a while, you're in great danger.
Well, you are.
Regardless why you want to use.
Well, I don't even know. Like, I've been clean almost 4 years, like 3.5 years. And, you know, I know. So I hadn't done drugs. I was drinking when I got out of rehab. I hadn't done an actual drug in almost or just about 4 years. And I found drugs, believe it or not. I was working at a detailing place, car pulled out, found an 8 ball, right? And I remember being like, my addict brain went, oh, I can do this once, right? And, you know, but I can remember being terrified because it'd been so long and that rush actually fed me, right? But the idea that it might not be what I think it is. And most drugs aren't. Like I know even a friend of mine, I piss tested them because I was trying to help them and I wanted to know they were clean. And it's, you know, I said, if you're not clean, tell me now because I'm going to piss test you. You're going to make me waste a piss test. So please don't do that. Right. After they pissed, they came clean and they were like, yeah, I did some blow. Right. I looked in the test. There wasn't 1 ounce of cocaine in that piss.
Was there something else?
There was MDMA, crystal meth, methadone, everything except cocaine. And the dude laughed at me. He was like, told you I didn't do coke.
Not like you. And what did you have?
Yeah.
Fentanyl?
So the day I went into rehab, I did 10 gram of coke,
Woo.
and I used to buy fish scale quality. Right, I was buying good shit, which just to learn that they cut it before it leaves South America,
And fresh.
because quite honestly, like it was alarming the quantity of fentanyl I had in my urine.
Wow.
Cocaine was but you know, not alarming. I could have overdosed from fentanyl like so many times.
Right. Well, I mean, I know, like, I shouldn't say, I guess I can incriminate myself, but back when I was moving dope, right? Because that's how I had to do it. I had to sell it, right? And the guy, 2 guys above me, right? I think it was like every 2 or 3,000 bags or something, they'd lace one up with fentanyl on purpose. Because if somebody overdosed and died, then it would go around that it was incredible. And it would just bring more people in.
The concept of the odd shot. People want the odd shot.
Yeah, dude. Well, I remember I used to do a lot of speedballs, right? And the 2 of them together, you know, like the up and the down mix. And that was like, to me, if you live through that, it's, you know, it feels incredible. The come down sucks. But I mean, I remember like just chasing whatever was going to be the best way. And it's close to death without dying. You know what I mean? Like it's so messed up the way I used to think. But that's what it's like, yeah, that's what drugs do, man. I always ended up in that situation that I said I'd never be in. Like, I'll never smoke crack. Actually, you know what I mean? I'll never do a needle. I'll never do meth. Like, I'm doing hot rails and you know what I mean?
And at the end of the day, it's the same thing that we were looking for when we were kids, even before we were teenagers. We want to take away the pain. That's the only thing we want to do.
Well, you're trying to fill a spiritual hole with a chemical solution, right? And you might as well just put a Band-Aid on cancer. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you're not going to fill nothing. And you're just going to chase that for the rest of your life until you die. And how many old drug addicts do you know? Not many, right? If they're still using, they're probably dead or in jail, right? So I don't know. I want to, like, I never used to want to get old, but I'm looking forward to being the old man. You know, the old cool guy. You know, that maybe the young guys laugh at, but you know, I want to get up and still put on my docs and go for a walk. You know, when I'm an old man, I don't want to be dead at 50. You know,
I relate to this so much, man, because I used to not care if I died tomorrow. Even as a family man, like I was doing everything for my kids, I was present, but if I die, I die.
Yeah.
Today, since I got sober, I'm afraid I'll die.
Yeah.
That's
well, you got a lot
it's
more
differently,
right? And that's the other thing. So, like, I know today, and I don't want to die, but if I died tomorrow, I'd be okay with it because I know where I'm going. You know what I mean? And it's like I have a healthy fear now. Like I you know, the ego in me hates the idea that the world will go on without me. But that being said, like if you know I die tomorrow, then I get to eat with the king. You know, and I'm cool with it today because my kids are all in really good situations, right? Like my you know, my son is on his own. He's out in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and he works out in Quebec. Actually, he's out by you doing construction. And you know, my 2 daughters, my one daughter lives in Bowmanville, the other one in Oshawa. You know, my daughter's a nurse, and my other daughter is going to school getting like honor rolls. Right? They're in really great situations with their lives today. So, like, you know, if I live and they want to hang out one day, awesome. But if I died tomorrow, they're okay, and I'd be at peace with it.
And
Go ahead, Eric.
then I'm at that place too now. And then
Yeah,
very much like Ev, I didn't necessarily like. I think I was sick of living, but I didn't necessarily want to die, which is almost the same thing, right? Like you talked about spiritually void or whatever. Call it what you will, but there was no will to live.
right.
That's basically the point. So it's repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And for some reason, at one point, I actually did get scared that I was going to die. For some reason, all of a sudden, after 35 years, an alarm bell went off, and I decided I didn't want to.
Praise Jesus.
Yeah, it's just that moment of clarity that you get,
Well,
right?
I'll
When
tell
you're this
you.
close.
Well, I'll tell you. So I remember with me. So a common misunderstanding or a misconception is that suicide is a cowardly act. First of all, have you ever tried it? There's nothing really cowardly about it, right? It takes a lot of balls to pull that off. First, it's a selfish act, first and foremost. It's selfish as hell because you leave everybody else with the pain. But for me, what happened was it was almost expected that somebody was going to find me overdose, right? But I knew I wanted to die, but I didn't have the courage to go jump in front of a train. So for me, it was I'll just do drugs until I die. And if my parents or one of my sisters or my brother or whatever find me, overdose in a hotel or in my room or in my house, or they'll be expecting it and won't be sorry. But can you imagine if, your mom found out you jumped in front of a train? That'd be hard on them, right? And so I didn't want to put them through that. And that's what it came down to. But, I just knew that I didn't have the balls to do it.
So are you?
What?
It's almost similar. Are you a Lane Stanley fan, like Alice in Chains? Because if you listen, I'm
He's
a
my
big fan of
favorite
Alice.
singer on the planet.
Okay, because he was clearly singing about that, right? And that's how he
Yeah.
finally ended up found in a hotel, 85 pounds.
Yeah.
Then
Well,
used his to identify him.
if you listen to any of my music, you'll see how I borrow from him all the time.
Well, I did listen to a song, actually. Is it Feel the Pain?
Feed My Pain, yeah.
Feed My Pain. There's a part before the chorus that sounds a lot like Alice in Chains.
Well, check out the song Like a Zombie, and you'll be like,
I
oh
listen
my.
to that too, yeah.
But I mean,
Are these songs about recovery particularly, or?
Yeah, like a lot of them, but a lot of them were more about the addiction, because it was what I knew. And actually, there was a part of me that wasn't sure if I was going to be able to write once I got clean. And I remember playing my first show without doing a bunch of shots and a bunch of lines, and I got out there and it was a good turnout because I think people close to me, a lot of them all came out to see, I think, to support me, but also to see how I do. Right. And I'll tell you something, I didn't move, I don't think, once on that stage. It took me about a good 10, 15 shows before I started coming back out. Right. But now, I'm on my game, man. I'm an old man, but I'm on my game vocally and musically. And we just put out a single and we had Mark Rizzo from Soulfly play a lead on it. Right. And that was just incredible to me. And through God, I got to hang out with Head Welsh from Korn. You know what I mean? We ended up, that was incredible to me. And that was all Korn were the band to me from the time I was 19 till I was I want to say close to 30. And I listened to Korn religiously, and getting to hang out with him for a day and just our relationship had nothing to do with music. He was a guy I idolized as a musician my whole life, and seeing how humble and cool that dude was, just the nicest guy. And I've met a lot of famous people, man, but he was by far the most humble and cool, and just talk to God like he's sitting right there. You know what I mean? And just nothing weird about it. And then, I remember him saying to me, we were talking about how God works in our life today. And he said to me, he's like, he made a comment about it. And I go, well, let me ask you this. He's like, what? I go, you're a musician that I admired from the time I was 19. I said, and here we are sitting here eating sushi. I go, and our relationship has nothing to do with music.
That's sick.
You tell me how it works, right? And, and it was funny because he was just such a nice guy. And I was saying goodbye to him, and I give him, the bro hug. I was like, thanks, man. Thanks for hanging out with me. And he was like, what, you're not coming to the show? I was like, what? He goes, well, I heard you were coming, so I got you a ticket for the show. And I was like, guess I'm going to see Korn, right? So I got to go, watch the show, go hang out with him after. Like, it was one of the coolest experiences, and it was all through God, and it was just such a cool moment, But that's what's happening to me today. Like, I'm through recovery. I opened for a show with Mark Rizzo. I'm listening to Mark Rizzo when he was in Soulfly from the time I was like 20 years old. Now the dude played on my album. Like, just the blessings that keep coming with recovery. I got a record deal, right after I got clean. You know what I mean? Like, all these things that I aspired my whole life to do that I kept screwing up because I kept using and thinking it was going to be different every time. Here I am.
The self-sabotage, right? You were ready, you had the talent, you could do it, but you didn't believe you could, so you didn't.
Right. Well, and anytime things went good for me, I found a way to mess it up. And that's what I tended to do. And I mean, I got to be honest, sometimes I still do it. I just work harder today not to. Because when things go good, my control issues allow me to wait for the ball to drop. You know what I mean? People think that that's being cautious. All that really is, it's a control issue. Right?
Yes.
We think we're going to have some kind of like say, or like, oh, well, I knew that was going to happen. And it's like, no, you didn't.
We're much more comfortable in the chaos that we create ourselves than chaos we don't expect.
Well, we confuse boredom and serenity, right? Like, I get,
also, yeah.
I sit there so many times thinking I'm bored, and, my sponsor will say to me, dude, you prayed for this piece, but I'm telling you, man, my mind is not always a great place to be, right? It's dark in there, and it's still dark in there, right? And that's why, like, I do a lot of work, because, I mean, an addict by himself is in horrible company.
You bring that up. I'm just curious, Chad. You said you do counseling. So you do therapy or counseling, or?
I did both. So what happened was, like, I've done 3 types of different counseling, and one was psychotherapy. And I remember because it was funded, right? So the government paid for like 15 sessions or something, right? And I remember sitting with the counselor, and we got up to around 10. And on the 11th session, he came in and he says, we bumped this up for another 5. He goes, we never do this, but we think you might need. So they put me through an extra 5, right? And he was like, and when this year's up, you apply for more because we think you're going to need about 3 rounds of this, right?
Wow.
Well, just hearing my life, right? And it's like, I know people that have had it worse, but I know people that have had it better. But I mean, him saying like how you're even a functioning human being today, I don't understand. There's a psychotherapist saying like,
what did that mean to you to hear that from somebody else?
Well, the thing
curious.
is,
did it hit?
Yeah,
like,
well, when I'm in the middle of it, it didn't feel different. It wasn't until I just seen like when I started understanding why maybe my life ended up different. Like how did I end up? When I got clean and walked into the grocery store and I didn't even know how to go get a bag of milk. And I use that analogy so often because it was so profound. You know what I mean? Why did I not know how to walk into a grocery store? Because I was out there doing other things. And then I was always in relationships where other people took care of that. So I didn't know. And, why did I not know how to treat people I loved? How did I not know how to show up for my children? No matter how much I wanted to, like I can remember saying to my ex-wife, I said to her, I was leaving for work one morning and I was having an emotional moment thinking about my kids and really missing them. And I said, I would have done anything for my kids. And all of a sudden it was like reality just hit me. And I was like, that's a barefaced lie. Because if I would have done anything for my kids, I would have stopped using drugs. But I didn't know how, right? I didn't know how to deal with anything. I didn't know how to not escape. I dealt, when I was growing up, we dealt with everything with volume and violence. So because I did better than my parents, I thought I was doing great. And I wasn't. I had moments where I tried and I did, I wasn't a shit person all the time. You know what I mean? I did do some good things throughout my life, but sadly people only remember for the most part the times I hurt them. And why wouldn't they? Right? And if somebody tells me I hurt them, I don't get to say I didn't. right? So I have to kind of own that, whether I feel my punishment is more severe than my crimes sometimes. Like when I don't have a relationship with my parents, and it's like, to me, I get it. I wasn't a great son, but I don't always see a lot of responsibility being taken in the way I was brought up either. And I guess the best part about recovery is I only have to clean up my side of it, and just pray for them that maybe one day they will, like, you can't tell me sorry and then go, I did it because,
No
sorry.
justification.
Crucify me like Christ I rise. Close my eyes. Drink the poison, but I don't die. Secrets die in the light. Mind so sick, but I can't hide. One last time. You can't fight my war inside. Beg for God, so out of reach. My soul is weak, reaching from so far beneath. Counterculture out the door. But sin won't burn me anymore. Save me, 'cause I don't want to suffer. I don't think I'll make it on my own. Set me free, 'cause I was made to suffer. Nothing left here but my broken soul. Save me, 'cause I don't want to suffer. I don't think I'll make it on my own. Set me free, 'cause I was made to suffer. Nothing left here but my broken soul.
Like, I know where I went wrong in my youth. Like, I didn't, but I didn't know any better. You know what I mean? Like, I saw what I saw and I thought, that's what you did. I thought that's how you acted, and when you're just done, You know, like I was just in a home where it was just unhealthy. I was in fight or flight for the better part of my life, right? Because I didn't understand. You know, I was taught to speak my mind, but I didn't realize that most people don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, speak your mind. Why? Like, say what you want. Be sure you're like, be sure of what you want to say, but your opinion doesn't matter to most people. So to be brought up to believe that everybody needs to hear you or you need to be heard, it's like, why? Why does anybody care about what you have to say? Especially if it's nonsense anyway,
Especially if it's nonsense. I like that.
you know?
Yeah.
And most of what I had to say, like I knew how to talk, I knew how to manipulate, I knew how to oppress, I knew how to do all those things. I knew how to lie, I knew how to steal, I knew how to do all these things, you know, but I didn't know how to be an honest, good person that didn't do those things, you know? And when you don't even start figuring that out till you're in your 30s, you can't hold a job, you can't, you know, you don't even realize you have anxiety because nobody's cared enough to try to figure this out with you, right? It's like I can remember having a panic attack the first time I was 30 something years old, and I was working for a guy and I ended up in the bathroom and I couldn't get out of the bathroom and I didn't know why. Right. And like, he said, "Hey, you good in there?" And I'm like crying, like, and I'm freaking out in this bathroom and I can't open the door and I can't get out. And it wasn't until later that I found out what it was, like a couple of years later. But like, you know, I didn't know what any of that stuff was. I thought I was just messed up and weird, you know, having anxiety, like having, you know, things like ADHD, you know, where, you know, OCD, like I would bet money that I'm a little aspy too. You know what I mean? Just from things like I know symmetry was one of those things for me that was really that will drive me insane. And that is why I started getting tattoos, right? Because it was either going to drive me completely insane or I was going to have to learn to accept that there's no symmetry. Right?
Yeah.
And so
Symmetry does not exist in nature.
so I had to fight against every thought, feeling, like obsession. But see, back to my obsession, right? I would obsess, like, you know, if I scratch this side of my face, I got to scratch this side. You know, if you get to know me, you'll start seeing my isms. And I got a lot of them. But drugs used to take them away, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would do cocaine and shit like this.
You would be able to mask.
Yeah. But when you're already feeling different, like the last thing you want somebody to see is your tics. And I got all kinds of tics, man. Like just little weird things. But we all have them. But to me, it was just, you know, I didn't have anybody to assure me, you know, and nobody showed up for me. You know what I mean? When I was a kid, you know, nobody was really there. So I didn't know how to do that for anybody else either. You know? So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think me and them could kind of relate a little bit to that because we show up on the neurodivergent page because we have, you know, the exact some
Same.
issues that were never diagnosed and we discovered late in life. And at this point, it's cost money to actually find out what. And it's like, why bother? Live with it now, right? Much like you were like talking about,
Yeah.
right? All these
Yeah.
things are
But
whatever
actually-
isms you call them.
Substance use disorder is on the spectrum,
Right.
funny enough, right? So whether we want it or not, we are to some degrees on the spectrum.
Yeah.
I have ADHD, I have other hyper sensitivities, you know, like I don't need to put a label on it. Drug addict is good enough.
Yeah. Well, and that's why they call it the spectrum, because there's so many. You can be Sheldon Cooper or you can be Rain Man. You know what I'm saying? Like there's such a, and so who decides who's worse? You know what I mean? That's why addict, I'll take addict, you know, and that, you know, I have a nephew who's on the spectrum, right? Really high functioning, but you know, things are in order. You know what I'm saying? And it's like that's the same with me. Like and that comes always what I thought was obsession comes down to those types of things, right? Like, you know, if I have something sitting on the table, it's all kind of got to be lined up on the corners or, you know what I mean? Or I just leave it completely because it will drive me nuts if I can't get it perfect. So it's like, I'm not even going to touch it, right?
And when you become
there's a
obsessed with
lot-
drugs, it becomes pretty deadly too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember the last time I did crystal meth. Remember I sat in one spot for like 3 days and I didn't move like this, and then just tiptoe if I had to pee or something. You know what I mean? TV like just loud enough that I could just hear it, thinking like, somebody's going to break into my house. And it was like, as if you need that when you've already got all the ticks and the being aspy and the isms, and let's do some crystal meth with that.
Yeah, it will be. I'll be at peace.
But I'm the kind of guy, like I could smoke crack and go do a eulogy, but you smoke a joint with me and I'll put the couch in front of my door, you know what I mean? And like sit in front of it. Like I didn't understand guys who could smoke weed, right? Like to me, it just,
Yeah, I used to smoke weed between 13 to 17, but after that was instant anxiety.
yeah.
Like even just smallest dose.
Yeah. It didn't like, I can remember the last time I did anything with like THC. I remember I had eaten like half a gummy and it didn't do anything, but I didn't realize they came in different, potencies, right? So I ate half of one. It didn't do anything. So the next night, I did a whole one, but it was of the highest you could get. And I sat there and I swear to God, like I thought I was going to die. And I was just sitting there like this going like, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. Just leave me alone. Blanket over my head. Just sitting like this, trying to watch a movie, I called in sick the next day to work. I was a disaster. But if I did coke all night, I'd go to work. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it's funny because the day I quit using, I had been up all night, but I fell asleep for like 15 minutes. But the cool thing is I got my clean day on video. I woke up and I hung out with my kids that day. When you look at that video, it doesn't look like I'd been on a 2-year run. That was me being like, okay, man, it's time. And like I said, it took me getting on my knees and just begging, just tell me what to do, man. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that's when the honey hits, right? They call it the honey, when the warmth comes right around your whole body and wraps around you. That's what that was like for me. And it was like, okay, there you are. There you are.
I can relate to that because my friends actually would just have to assume that I was always on cocaine because they couldn't tell when I was or wasn't. Because I was good at keeping my level. You know what I mean? What I always wanted to show, because the cocaine kind of super focused my ADHD or whatever. So I knew how I was presenting. In fact, if I hadn't done any cocaine, then they would probably suspect I was doing something because I was more like, I wasn't super focused. I was more paddled.
Right.
It's
Well,
really weird.
I couldn't do little enough to maintain anything. Like, it was like if whatever I got, half of it went on the plate, and sometimes they were this big, right? It was just like, let's get rid of it. It's got to be gone. That's why when I buy groceries, so like when I grocery shop, I buy food daily, because if I have a fridge full of food, I'll just eat it. Right? It's like, I'll just eat it. I'm like a dog. Like, you ever notice with a dog, or like if you have a cat, for instance, and you leave for 2 weeks and you put 14 bowls of food down, that cat will eat for 2 weeks, right? You do that for a dog, you come in 2 weeks, the dog will be like, where you been? I haven't eaten in 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Hey, that's what I'm the dog, man. I just it's got to go.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I have a similar pattern to Eric. Like I used without it showing to anybody, and nobody ever suspected anything. My wife didn't know I was using up until the day I actually walked out the door because she found some of my stash. She knew I was not doing well. And at that point, I was in sick leave from work, but she had no idea. That was a shock to her to realize I was doing drugs.
Right.
And I was about to die. I could have overdosed any day.
Right. So early on, because I did drugs for so many years, like I did my first line of cocaine at 17. I went to rehab at 39. Right. And I've been in the program off and on for like 9 years. So I'm like 49 years old. Right. For the bunch of years before I went to treatment, I'd say right up until the last 2 years, like the last 2 years, I was, I would go to work, but see, I would go to work and I would find my boss, and the most bosses that I worked for or worked with, I could get them to do dope with me because I'm good like that, right? Like I'm Eddie Haskell, buddy. If I want something, I'll get it. And if I can, hey man, do one of these with me. And the next thing you know, I can like piss around and do the things, right? But I remember near the end, one of the stories I tell near the end. Like it was so beyond, like nobody was fooled at this point. And I was working in a rubber factory, like folding hoses and things like that. And I was doing coke to go to work. And when I get too high, I do heroin to come down a little bit. And I can remember rolling up this hose and there was a trough on the ground. And I was on my knees rolling up this hose. And I would just go down on my forehead and pass out from the heroin. My boss would come over because he kind of knew, but he didn't want to call me out on it. And he'd kick me, wake me up. I run in the bathroom and I do a rail. And I come out all sketched out. And then I go in and do heroin because, you know what I mean? And it just turned into this and like puke in the, you know what I mean? Because the heroin would make me puke. And then I would do, you know what I mean? And I remember being up one time for like 11 days or 12 days straight and just standing there at the machine I was working at going, I wonder how long your body takes before it just shuts down. You know what I mean? And that was going through my head. And you would think at that point, you know, you might go, maybe I should slow down, but that's the nature of the disease, right? It was like, okay, I better do more then or I'm going to pass out.
Yeah. Well, I had those thoughts too. Like I didn't entertain them very long, right? I moved past that right away right back to what I was doing.
Yeah. You're like,
I didn't dwell on it.
well, you know, and it's funny too, because like I said, it's almost like you almost forget again. You know what I mean? Like all the damage you're causing. And then it's like, yeah, but this time will be different. You know what I mean? Like, and I just remember my one sister called me one time and it was years ago, mind you. And I don't have a really big relationship with her right now, but I remember my sister Pam, she called me one time and she had to have a few drinks because she didn't know how to call me out. And she, you know, I think she just needed to get the courage. But I remember her calling me and going, you know, why are you doing this? Like, why do you want to hurt me? Right. And when you don't think you matter to anybody, the thought that you could be hurting anybody doesn't even enter your mind because you don't feel like you matter. So how could you be hurting anybody? And if you're only hurting yourself, who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't care. When people would actually show me, like, tough love, I don't think is always the best way to go. Because for me, tough love, it was people telling me to beat it. And the problem with that was I made myself really unapproachable. And I made myself like don't dare confront me. Right? Because I will mutilate you with words and I'll make you regret the day you even tried. And I'll just say something that'll destroy your soul. Right? My words are my gift and my curse. Right? So people wouldn't, you know, tell me that things were building up because they were afraid to confront me until they were just done with the situation. And then they would just cast me off. Right? And then I would be like, what the hell? Like everybody's just turning their backs on me. Right?
They never said anything.
Right.
Yeah.
But if somebody said, you know, Chad, like, you're killing me, man. Like, my heart is breaking right now. Instead of, fuck you, get out of my house, you're a piece of shit. You know, then it was like, no, fuck you. You know, and those were the kinds of conversations that would go down. But if somebody just looked at me and explained that what I was doing was hurting them, you know, I would be like, that would affect me a lot more. Like, you're getting a lot more from me if I feel I'm hurting you than if you get pissed off at me. You know what I mean? Like, I remember I was staying with a friend of mine and she told me, she was like, if you use, I'm kicking you out. And I went out and I used. And I messaged her and I said, do you want me to just come home and pack my shit? And she's like, no, you're going to come and look me in the eye. And when I walked in, she grabbed me and she hugged me. Right? And I just broke down like a little girl. I just started bawling. And she said, I'm not going to kick you out, but you got to go detox. Right? But I mean, her doing that was a difference in me staying alive that day.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it takes. Like, I just don't always think tough love is the way to go. You know,
Back to what Chuck was always saying, right?
Yeah.
Your love, you tend to forget it.
right?
We don't love ourselves enough to think that we matter. But when somebody gift us that love that we actually are deprived of,
Right.
we don't even know that we are. But it is changing everything in a split second.
Right. Well, and too, like I can remember doing when I did step 8 and I had to make a list of people I had harmed and people I needed to forgive or people I wanted to forgive or wanted to forgive me. Sorry. And I remember my sponsor going, you missed somebody. He goes, you, right? You forgot to put you on your step 8. You caused yourself more damage than anyone else. Right. And it was like true. Like, pardon me, I couldn't look in a mirror, you know? Like I couldn't stand it. Like I just started taking showers that don't burn my skin off me. You know, like I would get in a shower and I'd get out and just burn the evil. Like that's what it felt like. Like just all the rotten things I would do. Like that's where I start remembering things in the shower. And the hotter the water, it seems like the easier it is to, you know, it feels like it burns it off. Like it's a weird psychological thing, but I'm at a place today where my showers aren't so hot. You know, and I don't necessarily love what I see in the mirror, but I don't hate it. But there was a time when I did.
You got a good point. And, me and Em have talked about this quite a few times, actually. It's to get to that self-love. That self-esteem is so low. At first, you think, or at least for myself, I thought it was humility. I was humble. But it wasn't that. Is that I felt like I wasn't worthy to say anything. So I was like meek in early recovery, right? It took a while to get that confidence, that self-esteem, to know myself better, to learn to love myself, but then to express myself. If I wasn't expressing myself properly, I was just like kind of letting other people, okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, you're right. And if I even tried early on, there was a time when I would, even where I work, if I had to tell somebody what to do, I felt the sting like it was wounding me. Like I wasn't worthy to even tell them what to do. And this is not my job.
And
it
feeling
took a
like
while in recovery to get to a better place.
Yeah. Yeah, because you didn't think highly of yourself, right?
Exactly.
And that's not uncommon. Like when you think about it, like, whether you can say it or not, I mean, people say to me, someone said to me a long time ago, tell me who you surround yourself with and I'll tell you who you are. Right. And I found that when I would look around, when you're living like a degenerate, you're just going to surround yourself with degenerates. And that's exactly what I did. And so when I'm hanging out with people like the people I was hanging out with, I'm a chameleon, right? Like I know how to adapt to the environment I'm in. That's what we do. Right. So I would become those people. And how can I love somebody or, I can't trust somebody because I know I can't trust myself. Right. I know I'm untrustworthy. So I wouldn't put any trust into anyone. I would assume everybody's trying to rip me off or scam me or something, and I looked around one day and I'm like, look at these people. I'm these people. Right. And I remember that being a very key factor in going to detox the first time, because I remember not wanting to go there because in my heart, I believed I wasn't one of them people. Right. And it's like, what, the people that want to get help? No, I'm these guys that think they don't have a problem still, that I've been with for the last 4 days in the same clothes, picking the rugs and looking out the window. You know what I mean? That's,
Exactly. I ended up there too.
Yeah, we're not weird. It's the program people that hug you. They're the weirdo.
Well, and we have that saying in the room too, in our support group online, in our alumni, where we'll say, we'll love you until you love yourself. That at first sounded really weird, right? When you're first hearing it, it's like, what the fuck do you mean?
Well, and that's,
how can you even love me?
Yeah,
Like nobody can love me.
We have a group of guys, and I've had the same, like, I want to say the same core group of guys in recovery I've had for like the 9 years I've been in there, right? And, we talk to each other. We almost make it uncomfortable with how affectionate we are to each other. You know what I mean? And like, you look at us and we're all a bunch of bigger tattooed guys, that have all been through the ringer. We've all hung out with the bad guys. We've all done the bad things. We've all done all the drugs. And here we are sitting at the table saying grace, hugging each other, making sure, there's eye contact as you're looking at this man that you were in the trenches with, that you're now, crawling out with, looking him in the eye and going, I love you, brother. Just hands down, like eye contact, kiss on the cheek, hug, love you. And we say I love you to a point where it makes other people uncomfortable. But you know what? Like there's, those are the things that get me through it. Because, those are the guys that at my lowest moments that will tell me I'm awesome. Like my sponsor, he's become one of my best friends. Well, he was a good friend before he was my sponsor. He was the first guy I got honest with when I had gone back out, right? And I was on a 2-year run, and he was the guy just as my friend, I connected with him because I knew I could tell him the truth and he wouldn't judge me, right? But you know, like the way that man has changed my life and the way he encourages me, you know, and you know, you can't buy that shit. And you know, when he tells me, you know, I'm really proud of you, you know, that's a feeling that I don't get from anything, you know, other than him. And it's one of those things that I couldn't imagine my life without today because it fuels me to such a degree. Right? You know, I got a best friend that I call on a regular basis that will give me the straight goods. And he doesn't candy coat anything, but I know it comes from a place of love. And at the end of it, it's always, I love you. I love you, you know, and it's never awkward for us, awkward for other people. And I kind of like that. Right? But
Yeah.
they're my support, man. And I would do the same thing to you guys, you know, like if I seen you guys, it'd be the exact same way because I do. There's a certain way you can love somebody without even knowing them because you know the trenches they came out of.
We get it. We understand one another, even without talking to one another,
Yeah.
because the addiction comes from different places, but we all end up at the same suffering point where we decide to get clean. And I think it creates an invisible bond between all of us. But I'm overly using the word "I love you," and I mean it every time I say it.
Right. And I mean, I think that's incredible. And I find just even using empowering statements without trying to sound like a, you know, a snowflake, you know, the more you can empower people in any way, shape or form, you know, just let them know, like, I love it when somebody says something really, really clever, you know, or I notice their awareness, you know, on their own behavior or something. And I love pointing that out to people like, wow, that's some really great awareness, you know, because when I hear that, I'm going like, oh, cool. You know what I mean? Yeah, I guess that is, you know, and then it makes me feel good. And if you're constantly surrounded by people all doing the same thing, there's not a whole lot of negative that can get in that space.
That's right.
Right. And the less you let that kind of shit invade you, you know, and I'm at that place now. Like if you're costing me any of my peace, I don't want any of it, you know, and trust me. And that's, you know, why I had to walk out of my marriage because it was invading my peace. You know, I couldn't be around a using addict and it was too toxic like that. You know, I don't want to be around ugly. And
So if I understand correctly, you got clean being in a romantic relationship with somebody that kept using.
yeah, so me and my
Wow.
wife at the time, we relapsed together. Right. And then I had to get clean because we were dying and we both were supposed to get clean and she chose not to. And there was some back and forth, like some sad attempts on her part. And, you know, it caused a lot of problems. But, you know, I had to learn that I can't save her and it's not my job to save her. And, you know, you either want it or you don't. And it's, you know, you get tired of hearing all the reasons why you're doing what you're doing instead of why you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing to fix the behavior, right? Like I can go be an asshole and lie because, you know, somebody did something to me when I was 5. You know, but that's not realistic today at 49. You know, today, if I'm doing something like if I'm lying or being dishonest or using drugs, it's not my mom's fault. That's not my abuser's fault. That's not my dad's fault. Today, I have a choice, right? But trying to stay clean in that environment, you know, and again, it's not even a personal thing, but when you're not clean, you're not healthy. So, you know, the behaviors, the narcissism, the gaslighting, all the things that come with addictive behavior. You know what I mean? Like I could not, it was too unhealthy for me. Right. And it was the hardest thing I ever did, you know, and it's like, you don't want to walk out of a marriage, but you have to. Right. So that's why people today, when they try to test me or they try to challenge my boundaries, I walked away from somebody that I loved more than anyone on the planet. Right. So don't tell me I can't walk away from this other situation that's not serving me. You know what I mean? And I'll do it in a heartbeat if you're going to jeopardize my peace. I cannot sacrifice any part of me ever again.
You were saying earlier that you know, suicide is selfish. Using is selfish. I think recovery only works when you're ready to put the same selfishness
Yeah.
into it.
I agree.
You got to put yourself first.
things. And it's like, to me, because if I don't have recovery, I don't have anything else. You know, my hierarchy goes like God, recovery, everything else. Did you get her there?
Yeah.
Attaboy.
No.
You made me have to do it.
I just
Fucker
realized
don't.
I can control your mute. I should now.
But yeah, like if I don't have God and recovery, I got nothing else. Right. And so like I'm very selfish with my recovery, and I'm very selfish with my peace of mind, because it took me a lot to get here. So if you know, I have some real simple rules to be part of my life. Don't lie to me and be loyal. And if you can't be those things, then what do I need you for? Right? Like, I don't care what somebody brings to the table monetarily. I don't care if you have no money, you know, but if you have no soul, you know what I mean? Like, if
Oh yeah.
you're a narcissist and a sociopath, you serve me no purpose. You know, I could.
And you know, Chad, you were talking about you walking on your wife, and it brought me to my own relationship. My wife was never an addict. I was the addict, and I was hiding it. I was hiding it because I was convinced that if I would let her see how sick I was, she would abandon me. You know, I was lying because I was afraid of what would be the consequences of lying. You know, that doesn't make any form of sense. And ultimately, even if I got clean, she had to walk out of this because, you know, trust has been betrayed so bad.
Right.
It cannot be rebuilt. And I could never resent her for walking out that door and leaving me with my, you know, pretty good journey in sobriety,
Right.
because she had to protect herself for once, because she's been pouring into my cup for that long. And I kind of feel that's what she did for your wife, at least for that last year. I guess you were kind of afraid to leave her alone as well, right?
Well, there's like many factors for me. So like the biggest one being, you know, when I would go to work, you know, the thought of coming home and not knowing what I was going to find. Was she going to be dead? Was there going to be strange people in my house? You know, and there was always, you know, I never met anybody that didn't have a job that always had dope. So there's a lot of questions there, and I would hate for you to leave it up to my imagination. But you know, like, the money's coming from somewhere. So there's that I never ever figured out in the, you know, 5 years that, you know, I got clean. I've been clean 3.5. I was on a 2-year run. So that was what, 5.5 years for her, probably still going for all I know. And that being said, you know, I couldn't, you know, the greed that comes in active addiction, right? And it's like the lying, the stealing, you know what I mean? Like, the rent was stolen multiple times, you know, and just, you know, make some reason why it was acceptable she did that instead of I was wrong. You know what I mean? Well, I did it, you know, fuck you, you did this and that. And it was just like, none of it was real, you know, but you can't argue with someone's imagination. But I would try. That's how sick I was. And that's what I realized and that's why I started going to Naranon, actually, because I got sicker in her addiction than I ever was in my own. Right? Like, the things that I was doing that were so unhealthy, you know, like, you know, just I started becoming verbally abusive. I started becoming mentally abusive. You know, I just couldn't. But I mean, I don't know too many people that wouldn't have done the same thing, you know, to navigate that. Like, trying to love an addict is hard, right? And I know
It's
that.
almost
It's
like
harder to be an addict.
Well, if anything, it showed me how I must have made other people feel. You know, like my older kid's mother, or my youngest daughter's mother, like the people that tried to love me when I was being that person. Although, like, for me, you know, it was next level. Like, I had never seen addiction and mental health at this capacity, right? And it was actually pretty terrifying, because it was just like, you know, I can forgive anybody that says sorry. I really can. And I did multiple times. Like, every time she would come back and apologize for her behavior, but then the behavior wouldn't change. Right. And it's just like, you want to keep, like I said, I believed in my heart, because tough love didn't work for me. So I thought if I was going to turn my back on her, how was that showing her I loved her? But what I didn't realize is every time I brought her back, I was enabling the situation. Right. I didn't cause her addiction, although, you know, I was the one, you know, while we were together a year and a half, and both of us were supposedly clean. and I brought drugs home. Like I was the one who brought the drugs home the first time, but I brought drugs home once. And then the rest of it went from there. You know what I mean? And it's like, there's so much, like the things like, being put in jail on a false domestic, the things she was doing that were like next level that I would still forgive. Right. Because I'm thinking like, she's a mess. But I also understood chaos because I grew up in it. Right. So the things she was doing were messed up. And the things she was doing to me were like nothing I had ever experienced, but it was all stemmed from the drug use. You know what I mean? But then I often wonder, was it? You know what I mean? Because she wasn't that different when she wasn't using either. Right? So
Yeah, because when there's relationship and addiction mixed together, it usually also comes with codependence,
right. And that was
which
huge
is
too.
harder than addiction to substances to break out of.
Right. And I find that I was very codependent in that situation for a long time until my boundaries came up, and then it would be like, I would very much see. So I did the work, right? So I did the steps, I did the counseling, I did all these things, and she did not. And even if when she would do it very lackluster. Like, 1, 2, the 1, 2, 3 dance and the step work. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, never clean anytime she was doing them. So it's not working anyway. So I'm getting, I'm doing the steps, I'm doing the work, and she's not. So even when she's not using drugs, she's done none of the work. When I quit doing drugs and I hadn't done any of the work, I was still acting out my character defects. So being on the receiving end of what I had done to other people, it was very eye-opening, right? So here I am, I've done all this work. I stayed clean for a year. She left on the day of my medallion. She, left our house, stole the rent money and left, right? And I had to go to my medallion and smile and get my 1 year, and even then I brought her back twice to try to help her. I thought I was going to save her, but I can't work her recovery, excuse me. But so, it was really hard getting clean with a using addict, right? It was really hard, because part of me goes like, well, if she's doing it, why can't I? My money's going on all this dope and I'm not even doing it. She's stealing my money to buy dope. I should get to do some of it. Now it's my addict brain going,
Of course.
why don't I deserve to get high?
So, Chad, if you fast forward a bit to today, you said you have 3 sponsees that you are invested with. And being a man of God for you probably as a other form of service that you're invested into.
Yeah. I'm telling you, once I got saved, it just changed the game for me, right? Like to me, I asked him to reveal himself in a way that I could not deny it. And in many ways he has. Like I could sit and tell you stories that you would either think I'm crazy or you might actually reconsider. You know what I'm saying? But it's like I've never been a guy to follow blindly. So, for my whole life I would hear there's a God, but I never saw it. And like I said, he was a fictional character in the book on my coffee table. Right? Now there's just no question. Like I went from hoping that book was true to believing every miracle in it. You know what I mean? Like I know that book to be truth. And I know by how he speaks to me today, and that's, conscious contact. Like it's next level, and he's not very subtle. Not with me anyway. So, but I love being of service to my church. Like my pastor is one of my best friends now. When I have a question, like what I love most about my pastor is if he doesn't know, he says that. You know what? I don't really know. And like, I have to trust the messenger. I don't want to be talked into many circles. And if I leave a church feeling like they're trying to sell me a car, I don't want it, right? So, but I love, faith. I don't miss Sunday. I just don't. I go to the events. Like I just love it as much as I love my program. I can't hear you now, Eric.
You hear me now?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay. I seen him looking. I think he something came up and he bolted.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's cool.
We'll wait for him because this part won't be in the podcast. Obviously, you'll just edit it out.
No, that's good. I do that too when I do mine. I got one coming up. Tyler Thomason's going to come on mine.
Yeah. When's that dropping?
Probably next week. I'm going to get him on this week, and then I'll do all the edits and all that good stuff. There he is.
Where'd you go?
I lost internet.
Shit. Really?
But yeah, so I just love I love my church. I love my pastor. I just love everything about my life in that regard today. Sometimes I wonder what the plan is, but sometimes I guess I'm not supposed to know.
What Eric's saying all the time, get used to not knowing.
My
Yeah.
meme that I like, get used to not knowing. Get used
You
to
know,
not
I'll
getting
tell you,
any
man,
answers necessarily.
I was actually friends with my pastor and I didn't even know he was a pastor. He used to come in, I used to detail cars and he used to bring his car into the car wash. And he came in for like 2 years. I had no idea who he was. Right? Like, well, I knew who he was, but not what he did. And I walked into the church just to check it out, and there he was preaching. I was like, how's that for coincidence?
It is.
No such thing.
Well, I believe that things manifest when we need them to. Because in my
Yeah.
life, I've been so many times at the end of my fucking rope, at the end of any form of hope, and then everything falls into place in a way that I could not have make it happen by myself. Like that happened
Right.
often for me. And it's because I was too blind to see that I was already doing it. And then I actually find it's a magical manifestation or is it God? It doesn't really matter. It happened. And that's enough for me to be agnostic to the very least.
Sure. And you know what? That's fair. And again, like, that means you're searching. And that's a good thing, right? Because you know there's something. And that's what I used to, one of the things I used to hate about people and their higher power, right? And it's like, people say, my higher power is like a door. It could be a door if you want. It's like, it's got to be loving, caring, greater than yourself. If you don't think you're better than a door, you know what I mean? Come on, right? It's got to be there. What's there when nobody else is?
Yeah, the doorknob is the one we use the most in our memes when we try to just be funny.
Asshole.
One that I've heard that I like is it's a bar of soap. Every day, every morning, I get to clean myself. That's my higher power.
Good. I'll take it. And that can be in your room when you're by yourself, so you're good. See, I seen Theo Vaughn. What did he say one day? He said, like, having God is like having a secret best friend. Like, who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, it's funny because the way I see it, and I mean it with all respect, with humility, and without a God complex, but I am, as I see it, my own higher power. I used to be powerless and I've empowered myself. I used to actually not be in control of anything. I am now in control and I am not willing to surrender that to any other form of anything because I live my life in addiction exactly this way, powerless until the day I got clean. Then I was no longer powerless. So getting clean for me was not a godly thing, right? I got clean through my own decision. And
Sure.
my decision was to actually regain control of my life and face my past, face my traumas. So in a way, like, and I say that as I say with great humility and more in a funny way, I'm not my own higher power. It's just the concept for me is not applicable in my current path of recovery because I don't believe that I have superpowers. It's not the point. It's just that the thing that I have lost and needed to find was me.
Yeah, and that's fair, but yeah.
I think it's better than a doorknob, but
Right. Well, you know what though, and it's like, and that's true. That's who we needed to find, and that's who we lost the most, right? But I found for me, it was like, once I found myself, I was able to realize that it wasn't me who was steering this ship, right? And like I said, like I have great admiration for people who have found their peace wherever that is, And I remember I used to say the same thing, and I remember a guy that I ran into, I think it was like a year ago. And he said, "Hey man, I heard you got baptized," right? He goes, the same guy that was running around saying he was his own higher power, you got baptized, right? And I used to say the exact same thing. But I'll tell you, man, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I wish that I'd become the guy that I used to make fun of.
yeah, that's
And I
beautiful.
never
For me, I think it's very beautiful because you became your own mockery, but now you believe in it.
well, it's because I seen it, and it's so insane to try to tell people like the things that I've shared, like, and I'll share. So like, I have a few faith-based friends, like there's Jamie Tall or Boston, or, I got friends outside of like this community, that I share things with, and I can share my supernatural sort of experiences with them. And they know because they've had similar situations, right? So I don't feel crazy when I share them. But when I tell you, like, I can give you an example. So, and I'll tell you this, and I've told it a couple times because I couldn't believe it happened myself. But I went through a phase where music wasn't fulfilling me, and music is my life. Like, music is my life. And I went through this phase, and I talk about it in the book I'm doing right now. And I remember feeling unfulfilled. And I said to a friend of mine, I said to her, it's not fulfilling me anymore. And she said, well, take it to him, meaning God, right? I didn't say it to another person because I didn't even bring it to God because I didn't want to hear the answer that maybe it was time to settle down on the music, right? So I never said a word about it to anybody. And I was at work, and my buddy Sergio called me. And my buddy Sergio is also God-fearing, and he knew I was at work. And if he's calling me, he knows I'm at work. It must be an emergency, right? And I hadn't talked to Sergio in probably a week or two. And he calls me, and I pick up my phone, and I'm at work, and I'm like, Sergio, you good, brother? He's like, yeah, man, I'm good. But he goes, Chad, he won't leave me alone. And I go, what do you mean he won't leave you alone? He goes, God won't leave me alone. I go, God? I go, what do you mean he won't leave you? Like, why? And he goes, he's telling me he gave you a gift of music. And he said he feels it's not fulfilling you anymore. And what he wants you to do is write a song for him. I almost dropped my phone because I never shared that with anybody. Now, I just told you that story, right? It sounds insane. And I wouldn't blame you for 1 second if you thought I was full of shit.
But no, Chad, for real, I had similar experience myself that I cannot explain. At least
Right.
not from my plane of existence, doesn't make sense. I'm pretty sure Eric has a few of these as well.
I
Right.
do, mess up.
Yeah, at that
I don't
point.
talk about them either.
Yeah. But I remember sitting with I hadn't called my sponsor in a little while, and I was sitting at a Medallion. And I was sitting there, and he sits down beside me, and he's like, and if you knew my sponsor, you would laugh because he's hilarious, right? And he sits down and he goes, what's happening, man? And I'm like, not much, brother. What's up with you? And he goes, haven't heard from you in a little bit. I go, yeah, going through some stuff. He goes, oh, yeah? All the more reason I should have been hearing from you. He goes, what kind of stuff? I go, spiritual stuff. And he goes, what kind of spiritual stuff? And I looked at him, I'm like, you see things? He goes, not anymore.
Not anymore.
He never said another word. He knew exactly what I was talking about, and I knew what he was talking about. And that's what happens when you meet people who've had the same experiences, right? And so that's why, like, they tell you right in the scripture, and I don't remember which one offhand, but they say, like, sometimes keep your experiences to you because you are going to look insane to some people, right? But I know what I've seen, and I just can't. And you're right. Like, it's cool because my life today is so different, and it's, like I said, it's peaceful. I love the peace that my faith has brought me, right? But I also know that sometimes this walk is lonely, man, because I can't relate to people anymore. A lot of people. And it's unfortunate because it's like there's nothing wrong with them, and I don't think I'm better. Like, not by any means, but the stuff I want to talk about, they probably don't. And I don't want to be that guy that's ramming it down people's throats. I just love about it because I know how real it is. I want everybody else to know how real it is, right?
You know what?
So I'm like,
What's interesting is that I kind of had those experiences reversed. I was born in a cult, so I found my way by getting out of that structure in my teenage. I was extremely
wow.
damaged from the experience, but I was big into God up until my puberty, let's say. Which is the reason why I guess it doesn't matter what I believe in, but what I'm unable to attend to is a structured organization around the concept of God. And I'm saying that like it's me. Like, I don't need anybody else to believe what I believe or have the same type of traumas that I had, but this is my story, right? Which means that when I'm faced with 12-step literature, I don't disagree with any of it. It's just things that I've been grinding on for years before my life became a mess.
Well, the thing with what I find is, so, like, I don't follow, like, my faith has there's no name for it. Like I actually asked my pastor, like, what is this? Because people will go Catholic, they'll go Protestant, they'll go Pentecostal. Like you never know what it is. Well, we are just Christian. We believe that Jesus Christ was here and died for us. And that's it. So all we do is there's a bunch of us who believe the same thing. It's not like we're there trying to recruit or, you know what I mean? It's like we all believe the same thing. So we all hang out and then we worship our God together. So I try, because I don't like the idea of the organization either. Right? Like when things start getting culty, it's weird. That's why actually one of the things I used to laugh about with the program is because it's kind of culty.
It is.
Right? Like they hug, they chant, they pray. Like there's things going on there that are culty. Fortunately, that cult saves my life every day. Right? And it's the same with the other one, but it's not culty. It's just we pray and we sing. But it's like you leave when you're done and you just try to live righteous, man. Like, so to me, it's like, I don't find it as organized as certain ones and nobody is unwelcome. And if you don't follow the rules, I mean, really the basic, the basic idea is to just be kind.
It sounds to me much more Christian than any other church that identify as a certain branch or anything. And at the end of the day, I want to say that the three Abrahamic religions, so Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, have so much more in common than anything else. Like that fellowship is universal kind of in those three relationships because the core values are the same.
And then it always comes back to like when I think about, I'll tell you one of the things that really sold me. Because like I said, I wasn't just a follower, but when you read how the 12 disciples were killed, right? And they were tortured and killed and dipped in oil and dragged and beheaded and crucified upside down. And all they had to do was say that it wasn't true. You know what I mean? Like these guys just were being tortured and said, just say you didn't see those things that you wrote in the book. Just say you didn't see those and we'll spare your life. And they were like, no, man, go ahead. I know where I'm going. Right? I don't know about you, man, but I would find it really difficult to stick to a bullshit story if I was getting killed for saying it. Right? And I'm not here trying to convince you in any way, shape, or form. I'm just sharing what sold me, right? Like you would never be able to convince somebody there is any more than you could convince me there isn't.
That's not the point.
Right. So I mean, those are the things that sold me. Like when you think about somebody's like, well, there's no real picture of Jesus Christ, and it's like, yeah, there's no real picture of George Washington either, but there's literature about him that tells you it's real, and it's verified, so you never know. I mean, I hope I'm right. In the worst case scenarios, I lived righteous, right?
Because
Like,
until
That's
we're
the
proven
point.
right or wrong, we got to take a lane and run in it, right?
that's a great way to put it. Ev. I like that. It's not about right or wrong, but pick a lane, right? Because even right in the scripture, they don't like lukewarm.
No, indeed.
Be apathetic.
Faith is
Pick a
not
side.
lukewarm.
The same way with recovery, you can't be lukewarm either.
Exactly. There's no gray area, really.
You either want it or you don't, and you do
That's
the
it.
work or you don't, or you
That's it.
live or you die. And it always comes down to that. And to me, it's like, I said that when I was a kid to somebody too, like, what if you're wrong? They're like, so what? I would sooner be wrong, you know what I mean? And risk being wrong and live my life righteous than be right and live my life wrong. You know what I mean?
Well,
if you live like a scumbag
yeah.
and you were wrong and you're in front of the king, you're going to have some problems. But if you're wrong and you just die, then who cares?
And quite honestly, I love being wrong. Like I love being proven wrong because then I get to truly evolve and get better.
I agree. And I learn the most in my mistakes. And that's what happens with me all the time. Like, that's where I do my most growing in discomfort, right? I don't do well in discomfort, but I learn the most in discomfort, and that's how it's always been for me. And whenever something's too comfortable, I'm probably doing it wrong.
Well, there's
Right.
no growth when we're comfortable.
That's right, Eric.
Growth
That's
happens
right.
outside of the comfort zone. That's true. Yeah.
And that's for sure. But yeah, so I just like I said today, man, it's all about faith, recovery, music, and trying to be the best person I can be, and hoping that my daughters one day decide they want to have a relationship.
That's beautiful, man. So you really found your way of life. your entire life is coherent now with your values.
It is, and they're not up for debate. Like I even recently, I was working in recovery. I was working at a pretreatment center, and they were paying me really well, and I had just seen enough of the stuff that was going on in that place where I couldn't be bought. Like I had to walk away from it. I didn't even have another job lined up. But what was going on in there was so morally corrupt and just such a dishonest place that I was like, I walked out, and like that was a tough thing to do. But Chad before would have just closed his eyes and done his job and done his thing, took the money and run, right? Whereas I couldn't do that today. And I'm okay with that. I've since found more work, but I mean, at that time, that was a tough thing to do, to walk away from a job on moral grounds, right? But there was no way around it. Like if I'm going to present myself as a man of God and a man of recovery, I can't be attached to things that infect my soul, right? My soul isn't for sale today. There was a time when it was, but it ain't anymore. And, so, and that's what I mean. Like my friend said to me one time, I want to be a man who knows, who you can tell who I am before I open my mouth. Right. And that's what I want to be. Like I want somebody to know who I am, and the type of man I am before I have to tell you. Right. And I try to do that today. I try to make sure that people know there's another way. I want them to know that there's something really beautiful at the end of all this. And that's what I keep trying to tell people. I wish I could show people this side of it first.
You carry a message of hope.
I have to, because there is, right? Like I'm telling you, if you can come from where I come from, and I didn't come out unscathed, trust me on that. I did not come out unscathed, right? But I'm here today, and today I'm a man. I can say confidently and not arrogantly that I'm a good man. I know I am, and I'm okay with that. Back to our self-worth, right? I know what I bring to the table today, and I know what I won't accept from somebody else on any level, partner, friendship, even my own kids. I still have boundaries, right? Like, I've had to have conversations with my children, when we still had relationships where it was like, I'm not going to allow you to keep forcing me to relive, this stuff. If you want to talk about it, that's cool. But, I'm not going to keep beating myself up, because, I haven't forgiven myself I have to an extent, but I keep things in my back pocket. You know what I mean? I remember, because the minute I forget, it leaves it too open for me to screw up again. That's why recovery is always at the epicenter of everything I do. Because the minute it's not, it's very easy to walk away from.
And that's a universal, right? Doesn't matter if you're doing Dharma or whichever program, SMART or 12-step, like it has to be a way of life.
That's right. And you can't, I live in steps, right? Just like you guys live in your SMART recovery. You have to. And when you think about it, like even 12 steps, it was put to me one time, the 12 steps in reverse is a typical road to a relapse, right?
It's true.
You stop carrying the message, you stop praying, you stop taking your inventory, you start creating new harms, you're bothering more people, your character defects start coming back, you start acting out in them, you stop voicing your problems, you start, building new resentments, you stop, you don't talk to God anymore. Step 2, you became willing. You're not willing anymore. And then by the end of it, you found some problem, right? And then you're walking down the street to that bar at 2 a.m. that you just happen to walk by.
Very interesting.
You brought up smart recovery, and I just want to kind of put it in perspective how I look at it. The smart recovery is my tools. It's not necessarily my program. I've incorporated a lot of different things as my program. I've kind of borrowed from everybody. But essentially, with Smart Recovery, I was able to get tools to get better, to dispute irrational thoughts or what you might call defects or whatever. And once I did some therapy and I got better with my self-esteem, I reestablished my core values that I had lost. And once I reestablished my core values, I knew who I was. And I'm a better person once I know I'm in line with my core values, and that's how I choose to live. So I give credit to Smart Recovery for helping me get there, but it's not necessarily a program. Like I might use the tools for certain things, but it's not exactly like steps where it's an ongoing thing.
It's not
in a way.
designed
I
to be a way of
incorporate a
life.
lot.
Smart recovery itself,
Yeah,
it brings you to sobriety, which you'd have to make your way of life. Yeah.
Okay, I got you. That's
I just wanted to
interesting.
clear that up.
No, that's cool. That's cool. So but like back to your core values, right? Like now you're in a place where you know who you are. So
Exactly.
these are things that are non-negotiable, and they're also
Exactly.
non-negotiable in other people in your life. So you're an honest, loyal guy. So you can't surround yourself with people who aren't,
Exactly.
right? Core values are huge. And the minute you start compromising them to be around anybody, it makes it really easy to start falling backwards.
It actually, if I feel myself compromising them, then I have to get rid of those people. That's when I establish boundaries, because
Right.
if I'm deviating from myself and my core values, then I know I'm not on the right path.
Well, I've always said we know right and wrong by how it feels,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And if you're questioning anything you're doing, there's usually a chance that it's probably not the right thing.
But
And this is
you
a
kept
good
saying
point. We
something
didn't
in
ever
the
talk about being sure about this, being sure
yeah.
of our recovery.
You kept
Yeah.
saying a thing that's really core to you in your recovery, and it's truth and honesty and being genuine, right? For me, this concept is more important than abstinence
Yeah.
in my sobriety. Not that abstinence is not important, it's definitely number two. But I am slipping if I'm ever not honest, either with myself, with others, with my acceptance. I keep myself in check from there. And
Yeah. Well,
as
not
go ahead.
being honest will kill you too,
Mhm.
right? Like, so if you relapse and you can't even get honest about that, you're going to keep going and you're going to die. So you need
Exactly.
honesty before you need anything else, because if you can't get honest with any of it, what is the point? But sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Finish up what you were saying there, Ev. Sorry about that.
But I was done, but I was also thinking about the step 10. Because for me, that always been, like I wake up and I kind of do that. Like, what have I done that's not great? How can I improve today? Right? Not that I'm necessarily following a recipe book, but like for me, that's always been a way of life kind of thing. So I can appreciate like that concept of the last few steps.
Right. Well, they say the more work you put in your first five, the less you have to put in the last ones, right? Last five. But the very last two, 11 and 12 are basically just maintenance, right? But step 10 is really like something that everybody should do just in general. Like, what didn't work for me yesterday? I'm not going to do that today. Promptly admitting you're wrong, no, that's a tough one. That's
But
not an easy one, but it gets easier because you're not making as many mistakes, right?
and at any given day, if you do step 10 and you find nothing, you're probably not honest with yourself.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that's living a perfect day, that's for sure. But you know what I mean? But like, I look forward to, I don't I don't struggle as hard to apologize these days because I find the things I do aren't as bad. You know what I mean? Like I was suggesting earlier, I was talking to somebody, I was saying like, it used to be I'm sorry I threw that chair through the wall. Or I'm sorry, I broke your face. But now it's like I'm sorry I didn't show up when I said I was going to. Sorry I didn't call you when I said I would. You know what I mean? But nowadays when I apologize, if I've hurt your feelings, it's harder to apologize not because of what I did was so wrong, but it's harder to apologize because it hurts my heart that I've hurt you and I need to apologize. And that's where my recovery is today, right? Like I'm empathetic. I'm sympathetic. Like these things that I didn't have in addiction. I didn't care about you. It was all about me. I didn't think much of myself, but I was all I thought about. Right?
Yeah. And that's like you mentioned that I believe 2 or 3 times already, and I think this is where my people pleasing went. It's true
Yeah.
empathy. Like I truly care, and I'm gonna do my best not to hurt your feelings, but I probably will.
Right.
I gotta be honest and apologize.
Well, you're going to fall short because you're a human being, right? We're all going to fall short, but we just don't stay there. We don't live there. Like, for me to believe that recovery was just going to make me perfect. I mean, I'm not somebody trying to be perfect. I'm somebody sick trying to be well. That's it. Right? That's all I'm trying to do. Be better than yesterday. That's it. And all I have to do today is hit the pillow clean. That's my only goal. You know what I mean? And if as long as I hit the pillow clean, I've already won. Everything else is gravy.
So, Chad, we already have spoken for literally 2 hours,
Wow.
as we usually do on this podcast. Like,
Yeah.
we don't structure it, we don't limit it, but at some point we lose people, so there's no point of continuing the discussion. We should have
Yeah.
you definitely back whenever you want to. But before we
Oh,
go ahead,
I wanted to ask, because I was looking through your music. Is Human God your newest song?
Yes, we got one coming out next week called Suffer. But Human God's the newest
Suffer.
one. Suffer. Yeah,
But we'll have to close out the show with Human God, right?
absolutely. Please
Well,
do.
do
We
you
will.
mind?
Oh yes,
No,
we
use it
definitely
if you want.
okay.
Anytime you want, you can use the shit.
So if you do YouTube strike us for copyright, we have to write to you, right?
Sign off.
But I'm talking about your
You
music.
have it?
Do you
Yeah,
drop
yeah,
only
new
singles,
podcast.
or is this going to an album?
It's going to be an album. It's going to be called An Invitation to Chaos. We're going to put out I think we're going to put out Suffer and one more, and then we're going to put the album out, right? It's got 8 songs on it, so there'll be 5 more songs to go, possibly a live track. So probably 9 songs. But we'll be putting that whole thing out. I'm really stoked. Like, this has been a while coming. You know, I went through a lot in the last couple of years, so it was hard for me to focus on getting this album out. But it's been a work in progress. But it's taking shape now, man.
So
So
it's
I'm
safe
just
to
like,
say that 2025 is going to be a big year for you. You have a book coming out, and you have a new
yes,
album. Are you going to be
yeah,
touring?
Yeah,
I
I
hope
was about
so.
to ask.
I hope so. We're working on a deal with. They're not called labels anymore. This is just called. They call themselves a promotion company, right? Because the days of record labels and that, like, that's done pretty much for my kind of music anyway. So it's a booking agency and things like that. So we got some things coming up, some possible festivals in the United States. So I'm really excited about. There's some talk about a thing in Germany and just whatever local shows we can always play, because that's how we fund the albums, right? We play live, we make the money, and then we put that towards the music, right? We never go out of pocket. We're always in a place where we haven't gone into debt playing music at this point. So as long as we're in the green, we'll keep doing it.
Sounds like a LT way to approach it.
Yes.
Don't go
Yeah, it's
above
exciting.
threshold.
That's great. I can't wait to
So
see you on tour.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I hope you come to Montreal.
Yes. That's actually, Heavy Montreal would be so cool.
Oh yeah.
Then you're gonna have to score me a ticket.
Oh, yeah,
It's
dude.
a hard ticket to get.
I'll just make a shirt that says Crew on the back and I'll just give it to you. Just grab a guitar once in a while and you're in.
There we go.
See,
Awesome.
that's addicts making plans right there.
That almost came out my nose.
Sorry. All right. So, any last words you like to?
If you crush Halls, does it go better? Because my nose is really blocked right
So
now.
it's funny because I just melted it in my tea. That's melt holes in my tea. Keeps my throat good. But last words?
Yeah. Any last words you'd like to be mentioned?
Yeah. The only rock bottom you can't come back from is death. Rock
Damn
bottom doesn't have to be pushing a grocery cart down the street, sleeping in cubbies. Rock bottom is only when you stop digging. So stop digging.
Awesome.
Excellent message. On
Yeah.
this, thanks a lot to be in this podcast chat. We really appreciate it, and it has been a lovely discussion.
Yeah. Thanks so much, brothers. God bless you. Thank you so much.
God bless you too.
Thanks, Jack.
We'll be in touch.
12-step
Yes.
Crashers.
Check out the page.
Where's the stop button?